Okay, so let me start off by telling you a story. 7 years ago, I had this amazing idea. I was like, you know what? Rental properties, the market's down, houses and cost, everyone's bailing out on their houses. Maybe I should buy a house. I always wanted to own a house. I'm from the Caribbean, so we all owned our house. It's not until I moved to the United States that there was a rental thing. When I was growing up, no one rented. Everyone had to build a house or it was passed down from generations. So I always wanted to own a house, just didn't know the logistics of going about it. So I had an idea. I wanted to buy a house. And I'm like, okay. So I went through the steps trying to find out how to buy a house, trying to talk to people. And then I realized I had to have credit. I had to have credit score. I didn't have one because I went to college via loans from people that I knew and just paying them back. So I didn't have to take out loans. I never owned a credit card because I heard too many stories of how bad it was. Never cared to take out money to buy a car. So I wanted to buy a house, but I'm like, you need credit. So I had to build my credit. So then it took a year, and then didn't have enough for a down payment. So that took another year. So fast forward 2 years after my amazing decision, and I'm going through and I'm thinking, you know what? I should buy houses and rent them out because I realized how much I'm paying for rent. And I'm like, at times I would have to rent just a room in a house or someone's attic, and that would cost me $500-600, and that's just for the room and everything else that was included because everything was included, water, da 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 da. So I'm like, you know what? That's six. If you have 3 rooms, I'm sure most people's mortgages, depending on when they bought. So I was going through when I wanted to buy rental property. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. So fast forward, going to buy my first house 5 years ago. So we're going through the process, and I'm seeing all these houses, and I'm like, okay, all of them is nice, but they're not exactly. I mean, I could buy them just to have a house, or I could try to figure out a way just to get a house that I know would rent, a house that I know that I can rent in the future. So then, lo and behold, my first house that I bought ended up being like 3 minutes away from the college that I went to, because then I thought I could rent this to college kids. Kids going to college, everyone's looking for a house. The parents especially are looking for a house because sometimes it's cheaper to rent a house or some place for your kids to live so they can partner up than sending them into the dorms because the dorms cost more. So we ended up buying that property, and the goal was then in a year and a half to rent it out after you found out everything about it. But then my now wife got pregnant, and well, I was like, I'm not the type of person to take that kind of risk where it involves other people. Myself, I don't mind. But if I'm going to put other people at jeopardy, my family at jeopardy, then I don't want to do it. So instead of renting that place out in the year and a half, we ended up keeping the house for 5 years. So now that we have 3 kids now, twins came after my first, and even my dream didn't die. It was just on pause. And this is why this show is dedicated to parents. Because you have all these dreams, aspirations, and then boom. Here you are with kids, here you are with a family, and then things are on pause. So now we're going into we're starting up buying rental properties again. We have a contract in on our second house. Our first we're going to use as a rental property because that's what it was intended for. And actually now I can get more every month in rent than I would have back then. So it's kind of worked out. But I say this to get into this point. How do you buy your first rental property? Well, I'll tell you on the other side. Welcome back to Investing for Parents. All you parents out there, sit back, relax. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to make you feel better because I know a lot of the reasons we don't buy houses, a lot of reasons we watch these videos is because there's a feeling of unknown, of not knowing what you're getting into, and it's just a scary ass feeling at times. So how do you buy your first rental property? And people will go through the process of telling you what to look for, what not to look for. This is what I'm going to tell you. Buy it, any property you want, any at all. Buy it in an area you want, because if you're looking for it, then somebody else is going to be looking for it too. Buy it in a decent to upper area, not upper, just middle class area. Because A, it's going to be cheaper, property taxes most likely would be lower, and you can afford it. But this is what I want you to do. Buy your first house. That's it. Buy your first house. That is your first rental property. Now, I tell everyone that asks me this question this. Buy your first house and live in it for a year. Live in it for an absolute year. Because if you're new to home buying, if you're new to home buying and or taking care of anything, like when you are renting, yeah, it's just a place you go home, watch TV, and it's a place to get away from rain and snow. Basically, that's how it is, right? So when you buy your first home, you get to learn everything about it. You get to learn what's wrong with it. You get to learn what you like and don't like. You get to learn how to fix stuff, which is the most important thing on your first property. Because if you are going to a rental property, you don't want to go into it and then have to pay everyone to do everything. And you won't know what things cost. My first house, within 3 weeks, I was like, why the heck did I buy this house? Everything seemed like it was going wrong. I spent more money at Home Depot and more time at Home Depot than I had in my entire life. Now, I was pretty handy. But if you're not, it's worthwhile to take the time to do this yourself. If you have busted pipe, look up a YouTube video on a busted pipe. You can afford to take longer to do something and learn how to do it than you can if you just let somebody else pay for it. Then you got to Google how much it costs. Then somebody's going to take advantage of you don't know. And these prices aren't cheap. For instance, 2 weeks into my first house, there was a backup of water in my basement because there was a toilet down there that wasn't plugged. And it was actually just water. It wasn't sewage. It was just water. And I come down, I see the water, and I'm going nuts. And I'm like, it's 10:30 at night. I barely know what the heck is going on because the house is an older house. So I have to call a local plumber. And he comes in, and he goes through. And I was thinking it was a toilet backing up. But no, it was water coming from a different side. So I'm trying to snake it out. I'm trying to figure this out. Nothing's happening. Absolutely nothing's happening. So I ended up having to call him. He comes through. It's like 20 minutes he spends. He figures everything out. He stops everything. And he calls me downstairs. And he's like, listen, I shouldn't tell you this. But this is what you do if it ever happens again. It's old technology, and you might want to take it out, but it's going to cost you a lot to do it, so at least you can take care of it yourself so it doesn't continually happen to you. I was like, oh, thank you. Now imagine if you bought this property and you weren't living in it. They're going to tell this to the current people living, and they're not going to either care about it or tell you about it. You're paying for it. It's over. You got to take care of it. So by learning that, then if ever comes up in the future again, I know what to do. And then a pipe broke here. Water was here. Electrical was here. This, that. I learned so much from living in my first house that it all ended up being that I'm confident no matter what happens while I'm renting this house, my first house out, I will know what's wrong just over the phone. I will be able to tell them, hey, go do this, go turn off the water here, go do this. I think da. I will at least have an idea of whether I can do it myself or whether I need somebody else to do it. So buying your first house allows you to go through the process of, if you want to buy more rental property, it allows you to get your feet really wet. And in my case, actually wet in the first 3 weeks. But it allows you to know the house. Now, my second house, our second rental property, we're going to buy it and live in it for a year. But not because I want to know about the house, but because I want to use it as a permanent resident and not have to pay the 20% down that they normally ask for, or get a higher interest rate. Because if it's your main permanent resident, they don't charge you as higher rates as you would if you were buying a vacation property or a rental property. But in living there for a year, I'm going to be able to work on it, make it a certain way I want, and just learn the ins and outs of the house. Now, that way, when I move on from that house, it'll be easier for me to property manage my own. Now, the process of buying your first house is the same. Your first rental property, it's going to be the same. But you want to be able to embrace it. We are moving to the new house. It's going to be a permanent resident, but only for a year so I can cash out refinance. Different thing, right? So I can get down payments on my next property. The goal is 5 properties, 5 years. That was the goal before, but there was the pause. Now we're going to start it off again. But that's the goal. Now, once I live in this property, since it's in another state, I'm going to get an idea of, well, this I don't like, this I do like, this area seems to be on the up and coming. So maybe I want to look in here to buy my next property. Living in your first property, you get to learn. The most important thing is an education. If you don't have, and not like a college education, but a physical, everyday education of yourself, the property, what you can and cannot do, what you're willing to do. If you are not doing that, you're losing money, because property managers don't care about your property. It's a numbers game to them. Make it a numbers game to yourself where you know everything there is to know about your property. And then after you bought that and you've lived in it for a year, and I say a year because that's how long it takes you to refinance and cash out and get money in your property, so long as you bought the property in equity. That way you can then use that money towards your down payment. So I always say a year is good. Maybe you'll find somebody else who will do it earlier, but I always say a year. You live in it a year knowing it's a year. It's not your home. It's not the big one you want. It just fits all. Location, possibility of being rented, everything. That you're just looking at this home, this house as a house with potential, but comfortable enough for you. And you'll get to see that when you live in it. So thank you for joining me. Listen, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you comment. Tell me where you are in your investing journey, not just in houses, stocks, whatever it is. Put money away from your kids. I want to know it all, because I've probably been there, or know people that's there, or just want to hear the best thing people can do in comment section. Like, I actually learn more from comment sections than I do from most videos, because there's always someone making a suggestion. There's always someone saying something, and then you're like, whoa, and then you go to another video based off of that suggested in the comment section. That's why the comment section is important. So I hope you can join me next time. I'll see you.